Hey everybody, Eric here from TOURNA-MIX. Today we're going to take some raw drums that sound like this. And we're going to make them sound like this. Once again, here's the raw drums. Alright, it's a good raw acoustic drum recording, there's nothing wrong with it, but in the context of the song that we're working on today, it just wasn't the right sound, at least not for what I wanted to hear, okay? I wanted to hear a big, epic ballad sound. Real quick, let me just play you the full song so you have some context.
I wish I had a time machine. Red was gold and blue was green.
Right? Really epic, kind of a ballad, classic ballad vibe, kind of an 80s thing in my opinion. And I wanted to hear like a huge epic kit. And so that's what I did. Let's take a look. All right, so the secret, and it's really not a secret, was to use samples. I did do some actual mixing on the raw kit, but the samples are what really gave it the sound, and there's absolutely no shame in using samples. I mean, when you're given a raw recording that doesn't sound in any way like what you want it to sound like, it's going to be almost impossible to get it there with just straight mixing. Maybe there's someone out there who could do it, but for what I wanted, there was just no way. Samples was the answer. So once again, I have a completely raw drum sound here, and I've got the samples muted. Let me just play the drum kit and turn the samples on halfway through. I have the reverbs temporarily muted. All right, so that was with absolutely no mixing. You can see all of the drums here. These red guys, and the yellow tracks are just the auxiliaries. All of the plugins are muted. The reverbs are muted. That's the Send 43 here. But even just by unmuting the samples, we get a huge, lift in the sound. It's still not the sound I wanted, but it's a much more solid sound. All right, so let me play it again now and bring in the reverbs. All right, so the samples made a big difference, and then the reverb really pushed it over the top. And it does sound a bit funny in solo, but in the context of the full mix, I thought it worked well. Let's take a look at all the drum processing now. So first I started with some really subtle drum bus processing, a little bit of compression followed by a little bit of tape. Here's the raw drums. And with both plugins in, very small change. It's a little bit brighter with the tape. Tape sort of has that effect of bringing out the lows and highs a bit. And you can see the needle was hardly moving here on Novatron. Just really subtle drum bus compression. For the overheads, I used the API Vision channel strip from UAD, which it was the first time I'd ever used it. And, I didn't do a whole lot, just a little bit of a high pass filter here at 50 Hertz, a little bit of drive. This adds sort of input gain into the preamp section of the plugin. So a little bit of saturation there and a little bit of gentle compression with the compression unit here. Here we go. Here's off. And on. You can hear it tightens the signal a little bit. I also did some EQ, by the way. I have got a 10K shelf here, bumped up by 2 dB, and a little bit of a cut at 500 Hertz, which is, your typical drum boxy kind of frequency. Looks like I also pushed up some 200 Hertz here. So, your standard kind of processing, just a bit of EQ and compression, a little bit of saturation, just helped to kind of perk them up a little bit. Now, because I relied so heavily on my samples and reverb, I did almost nothing to the kick and the snare. The acoustic kick, all I did is invert the polarity and compress it just barely with Novatron. And it was the same for the acoustic snare, this guy here. All I did is add Novatron, just a little bit of compression. I didn't even really bother EQing it, okay? So I'm not going to do before and afters on those because the effect is extremely subtle. All right, for the toms, all I did really is gate them first of all. So here, for example, is the raw tom bleed. If we just listen to that, it sounds like this. Right? And then using the Oxford drum gate, which is unbelievable, I just gated the sound a bit, actually entirely. All right, so that took care of that. And then actually it looks like I routed all 3 toms to the auxiliary here and just processed there. I added an EQ, just high pass filter actually. Then I clipped the toms, okay, using the big clipper from Boz Digital. And then I probably added some revival. Yeah, this is revival, adding some top end and low end to the toms. Let's go find those toms. I also inverted the polarity on 2 of them. Okay, so if I just take off all the processing here on the toms, we've got, this is like the raw kit leading into a fill. Right, let's listen to that one more time. And if I turn everything back on, we have this. Right, much tighter sound, but really not that much processing. You can see big clipper here. Let's watch that. Yeah, that's pretty cool. I mean, it doesn't really change the sound, but it lowers the peak values quite a bit. And then finally, some insane reverb. You know, it's amazing. Effects are often the thing that change the sound the most. In this case, that was by far the biggest thing that I did was just drown them in reverb. And in case you're wondering which reverb, this is, my kind of go-to for drums, using about a 2-second plate on the toms and the snare, which we'll come back to in a second. All right, let's move on. All right, let's bring in those samples now. We were actually provided with this sample. Okay. If I play it with the acoustic snare, it sounds like this. If I mute the sample, bring it back in. So the purpose of that sample, for me at least, was just to reinforce the acoustic snare. It didn't change the sound a whole lot, but it made it sound a bit more solid. But then what I did, because I wanted a really big 80s sound, is I brought in a new sample, this one here, which sounds a lot more kind of artificial, and then I just drowned it in reverb. All right, and then I also brought in this kick sample. Here's the raw kick. Here they are together. All right, and on the samples, I mean, I didn't really have to do much. All I really did is bring in some, just a high pass filter and a bit of compression. Here's the kick sample. See it compressing a bit here. Okay, same with the snares. Like, they didn't really need much work because, you can see I leveled out the velocities pretty well in trigger, so we don't really have a lot of dynamic range here. I kept some of it intact, like some of the little fills here you can see. But again, on this one here, all I did is accentuate a bit of body on it, okay, and compress it with Novatron. So here's that big 80 sample again. If I mute this, it just sounds a bit thinner. Yeah, that really added a bunch of beef to the sound, and then a bit of compression, okay? Let me play the full kit again here. So here's the full drum mix without the 2 main samples that I brought in. And I mean, it's night and day. Anyway, you can hear there's a radical difference there. But I'm sure you'd agree that the thing that, took the sound from a certain place and completely transformed it was the samples. It wasn't like, all these other, EQs that I did. I mean, for example, this overhead EQ job and compression job I did, that was just very kind of mundane. I mean, it didn't really do much. It was this guy right here and this guy right here That's where I got my sound from. Let's hear the full song one more time.
I wish I had a time machine. Red was gold and blue was green. And
So you can really hear that when it comes to the drums, the samples were, I mean, they were key. And that, that assumes that you like the drum mix that I did. Some of you may have actually preferred it without the samples. Maybe you like a drier, more natural sound, and that's fine. But for what I was going for, the samples were key. I don't think there was any other way that I could have done that without them. So no shame in samples. Samples are awesome. Samples are your friend. When you're given a sound that isn't, in the arena of what you want it to be, samples are a great choice. They at the very least speed up your workflow immensely. And I would argue that in certain contexts, they are the only way to get, a desired sound. So that's the lesson for today. I hope you enjoyed that, and we'll see you soon.